Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing okay. Welcome back to the Might and Magic 6 completionist run. We're now on part 3, and we're finally ready to actually start our game. I know it's crazy. We're already 2 parts in, and more than an hour in, and finally we're ready to actually start. And what better way to kick off an epic fantasy RPG than with some epic fantasy opening narration. So let's do this.
Having cheated death during the night of shooting stars, you find yourself as far from your village of Sweetwater as old Falagar's magic could take you. 3 years have passed while Falagar imparted what knowledge he could to train you in your chosen professions. But the time came at last when he could teach you no more, and you have ventured into the world to seek your fame and fortune. Now, a world away from your lost home, you have stumbled across evidence of a terrible conspiracy involving a new religious cult. 5 letters from King Roland to his wife Catherine, and a letter from the King of the Devils to a wicked traitor named Solomon have turned up in an abandoned goblin camp. Your fate seems inextricably bound to these letters and that awful night, and your role in the events to come may be larger than anyone could imagine. The tools you have are but a small sum of gold, your wits, and a lot of potential. The roads ahead are infinite, and all the choices are yours to make. So choose wisely. Good luck.
Alright. So first of all I have to say, I actually really like the voice acting in that little narration sequence there. You could say it's a bit over the top, a bit cheesy, but I would argue that it's warranted given the game and given the genre. It's an appropriate amount of cheese. It's like a nice pizza. So our narrator friend told us a few things there. Apparently we're from a place called Sweetwater where something bad happened and we had to be spirited away via the magic of somebody by the name of Falagar, who we can only assume is a magic user of some kind. So apparently something is amiss in Sweetwater, and who knows, maybe we'll get a chance to go there at some point and see exactly what's going on. We also learned a little bit about the state of the world. Apparently not all is well over here. Right now we're in the region of Enroth, which, if you played Heroes of Might and Magic 2, you'll be familiar with, and which if you didn't play that, it doesn't matter, because we're going to be delving in and learning about this place by just exploring it. And towards the end of that, we were also told that we will have a lot of choices to make. Now, the storyline for this game is pretty linear in the sense that it just follows one path, and we won't be able to change it. We won't have choice in that narrow sense. Although technically this game does have multiple endings, there's really only one true proper ending, and the other ending, if you could even call it that, it's really just the you screwed up and everything is ruined forever ending. So really this game only has one ending, but the way you get to that ending will always be different from playthrough to playthrough, and even if you try to always follow the same path, I guarantee you that there will be small differences. And it's gonna be up to you to decide where you go at what point, what order you do the quests in, how best to use the different resources and items you come across in your travels, how best to develop your different characters and their skills. A lot of decisions to make. The first decision is, of course, we need to decide who exactly we even are. So let's do that. Here we have the party creation screen. As you can see, we'll have 4 members. And what I'm about to say might surprise those of you who are veteran Might and Magic 6 players, but I already know the party that I'm going to go with, and it's going to be this exact default party, without me changing any of these classes. And I'm doing that for 2 reasons. Number 1, for nostalgia, because the very first time I ever played this game, it was with this default party. And the other reason I'm doing it is to show maybe people who are new to the series and who might be intimidated by the fact that it's an older game with a lot of different things on the screen. I want to show you that you can do well in this game without agonizing over which classes to pick at the beginning. There are many pathways to victory with essentially every possible combination that you can think of. But we're going to be going with this one. And I'll just briefly go through what all the classes are. We have a Paladin, which is actually a hybrid class. It's a cross between the Knight and the Cleric. We have the Archer, which is another hybrid class. It's a cross between the Knight and Sorcerer. We have our Cleric and Sorcerer, which are the 2 dedicated magic-using classes, each with their own spheres of magic that they specialize in. So Clerics are more, healing-oriented, spiritual magic, that kind of thing. Sorcerers are elemental magic, so a lot of the high damage spells will be coming from this collection of spell schools. And yeah, the other classes that we could have picked, but which we won't be choosing, are the Knight, which is essentially your dedicated non-magic physical damage tank kind of class, and in my opinion the least interesting. We could have also picked the Druid, which is a cross between the Cleric and Sorcerer. So essentially a dedicated magic using class, but unlike the Cleric and Sorcerer, Druids can't learn light and dark magic. Now you can do some interesting things with Druids, especially if you're going for more power gaming kind of builds. But this is going to be a more relaxed kind of playthrough, and the fact that Druids can't learn light or dark magic is a bit of a drawback, because there are some really interesting spells in both of those spell schools, which the Cleric and Sorcerer will eventually be able to learn. Alright, next, let's just quickly take a look at the statistics. Might, as you might expect, influences your attack damage. That's all it does. So there aren't any weapons that'll require you to have stat prerequisites, but there are other things that'll require you to have a certain amount of stat, for example, training in certain skills and certain challenges within the game. But generally, stats are just giving you passive bonuses, and that's their main purpose. So Might will be increasing our attack damage. Intellect is a stat that's relevant only to archers, sorcerers, and druids. By what it does is it will raise your maximum spell point capacity. Personality is a stat that is relevant only to clerics, paladins, and druids, similar to intellect for the others, in that it'll also raise the spell point capacity for these classes. Endurance will raise your maximum health capacity. Accuracy, pretty self-explanatory. Speed, similar, it's pretty obvious what it does. It reduces the time you need to recover from different actions. Like, it doesn't affect your movement speed across the map. That's fixed. Luck is one of the more difficult to understand stats, but you don't really need to know it. Like, if you read the description, it says it affects things. The examples it gives here are magical attacks and trap damage. There are a few other things, but you don't need to worry about it too much. I beat the game 5-6 times without ever knowing how luck worked, so you don't really need to stress out too much. So I'm just gonna do some stat point allocation here. The first thing I'm going to do, for a reason that I'll explain once we're actually in game, is I'm gonna reduce everybody's luck as far as it can go. And because intellect is irrelevant for our paladin and our cleric, I'm going to reduce their ranks in that as far as it can go. And for the same reason, I'm going to reduce the personality for our archer and excuse me, for our archer and our sorcerer as far as it can go. I'm going to start allocating. I think speed is a very important stat, so I'm going to increase it as far as it can go, and I apologize if you can hear my rapid clicking. This is really the only time in the game where I'm going to be doing this. Fortunately, this game is, it's not like Diablo, so for the most part, you won't have the issue of clickety-click too much. It's just in this screen where I've got to reduce things and increase things. And then my remaining points are, I'm just going to put them into accuracy. You have abysmal accuracy, so I'm going to raise yours to 10, and then, you know what, let's just give 1 point each to everyone. That's good. Before I talk about skills, I'll just show you something else that you could do. This mode. Just a quick sip of water. One thing you could do is you can change your character portraits. So we start out with this handsome man, but we don't have to stick with this.
Pick me.
You can choose a different one, and as you can see, if you choose a different one, it chooses a different name, which I assume is picked from a list of names that the game has.
Choose me. Hey,
We're just gonna
gotta pick me.
go through all of them.
I'm ready.
It's me you want.
See, now we're at the female portraits.
How
Quickly
about
go
me?
those through those.
Take me with you.
And as far as I can know,
I'm the one you want.
as far as I know, in this game you can only so the sound clips, the voice clips associated with the character are bound to specific portraits, so you can't mix and match. But in my opinion, the sounds are appropriate to what their characters look like, so I'm not too upset about that. I'm just going to quickly rename this character to what it originally was, because that's important to me. So you are going to be Roderick the Paladin. And now let's talk about skills. So our Paladin starts out with Sword, which is a weapon skill, and Spirit Magic. Now weapon skills are cool because like every skill, when you invest skill points in them, they get better. But at certain thresholds, you may be eligible to become an expert or a master in that skill. And that unlocks new perks. So for Sword, at the expert level, it just lets you apply your skill bonus to recovery time as well as attack bonus. But at the master level, you can use a sword in your offhand, which means you could use 2 swords, you could use a sword in your offhand, an axe in your main hand, sword and dagger. Like, it opens up a lot of possibilities, and it's a lot of fun. Spirit magic is an important school of magic because it'll allow us to remove curses, and it has some important buffs that'll, for instance, improve our attack bonus, and our melee damage. What other skills am I going to give you? I can give you 2 skills. Well, shield. I'll give that to you. Even though by the end game I'm not sure whether you'll be running with a shield and a sword, or 2 swords, or maybe a sword and a spear. You know what? Let's actually not give you a shield. Let's give you a spear. So one thing we can do, spears can be used one-handed or two-handed, and that means you can use a spear as a two-handed weapon, or you can put something in your offhand and use the spear one-handed, meaning you could use a spear and a shield. But what I want to build this guy towards is being able to use a spear one-handed in his main hand and a sword in his offhand. And I think that's going to be a powerful melee build, especially if we find artifact or relic swords and spears. That's going to be the build I'm going with for him. I'm also going to give him diplomacy. Now, if you watched my opening video, you will know that I called diplomacy a skill that's completely useless. What it does is it reduces the penalty towards our reputation for bribing, begging, or threatening, and there's really no reason to ever do that, so it's a pointless skill. But as I said when I was talking about my objectives, because this is a completionist run, and because it wouldn't feel right to me for there to be a skill that nobody has, for that reason, I'm sorry, Roderick, but you're gonna be the one to have the diplomacy skill. But I'll make it up to you, I promise. So we're done with Roderick. Moving on to our archer, Alexis. We can see she starts out with bow, ranged weapon, very important. She also has air magic, which starts out with a very useful utility spell in the form of Wizard Eye, which will mark enemies on the map, and later on will allow us to fly with a spell that is aptly named Fly. It'll also have Starburst, which is one of the coolest and best offensive spells in the game. So this is a very important magic school. Aside from that, we'll give her Disarm Trap. She's going to be our trap disarming person, which I guess seems appropriate, right? Archer, good reflexes, disarming traps, kind of rogue archer kind of thing I'm going for. I mean, you can have anyone else learn that skill, but I am trying to roleplay a little bit. And aside from that, she doesn't start with a melee weapon skill by default, so we're gonna give her Axe. Looks good to me. Next, we move on to our cleric, Serena, who starts out with Mace, which is a melee weapon. Body magic, which is healing oriented. So aside from healing damage, you can also, cure disease, cure poison, and some other important skills later on. Aside from that, we will give her a shield, because I do want my healer to also have good defense. I don't want you going down first. I will also give her repair item. I guess, if we think of healing as repairing the body, we can think of repairs as healing the item. And as soon as I said that, I realized how stupid it sounds, but you know what? That's gonna be my rationale for making her the person with this skill. Someone has to have that skill. It might as well be her. Next, we move on to Zoltan, our sorcerer. let's see. I'm gonna give you... So you start off with a dagger and fire magic. So dagger is an interesting skill because let's just look at what it does for us. So at the expert level, we can use a dagger in the left hand, meaning he will be able to dual wield daggers pretty quickly. And at the master level, it's a chance to cause triple damage. And that chance is higher the higher your skill is. And all of this is to say, by the end of the game, thanks to this guy will actually turn into, you know, this guy, the unassuming, you know, frail magic user, you know, tied with Serena for the lowest might in the game. By the end, he is going to be a melee powerhouse. Just to keep an eye on this kid. He's going places. Yeah, I realize I sound like a stereotypical high school football coach, but you know what? That's okay. And the skills we're gonna give him are identify. He's gonna identify our items. I guess that feels appropriate. Our mage is also knowledgeable about items and their magical properties. Aside from that, let's give you leather armor, which I think is the only kind of armor sorcerers can learn, just to give you some defense. And I think we're done. What I'm gonna do now is... yeah, let's call it good. We're in the game. What I'm gonna do now is, because I think the in-game volume is a bit different than the volume in the menu, I'm gonna end this video, adjust my settings, and we'll be back in part 2 when we actually start moving around and doing things. So alright guys, I will see you then.